Hello world, my name is Benny Grotto. I'm here at my studio Mad Oak in Boston, Massachusetts, and I've got my hands on a shiny new AudioScape 305R, which you can kind of see behind me, barely. Anywho, I am a former owner of the original hardware, the Master Room 305 that it was based off of, and I very foolishly and regrettably sold it some years ago. So I was pretty eager to get my hands on this new gadget when AudioScape announced it was forthcoming. One of the things I really loved the original for was using it in a lot of the places where my studio's plate reverb would have worked well. So that would be things like vocals, guitars, sometimes drums. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun today to do a little video comparing the sound of the AudioScape 305 reverb to that of my plate reverbs. So up in the loft at my studio, we have two plate reverbs made by a company called Audicon. One of them does not have an adjustable reverb time. That is to say that the damper on it that controls the reverb time has broken. So I thought it would be prudent to compare that particular plate with the AudioScape Spring, because similarly, the AudioScape Spring reverb does not have an adjustable delay time. The plate reverb is mono input. The AudioScape is stereo input, but it's got this snazzy button on there that allows you to sum the two channels before they hit the reverb tank, which allows for effectively a mono feed into it. So I've selected it accordingly so that it's kind of operating pretty similar to the way my plate operates. The AudioScape has a control on the front panel that allows it to return just the wet signal. In other words, rather than like a blend control or something, you've got basically just the reverb return coming back in. So I've routed it that way. That's the same way the plate reverb works. The only feature really that the AudioScape has that the plate does not is an EQ, very basic for basic general tone shaping. The plate does not have that, although it's pretty typical to return the plate back into a channel on the console and EQ it a little bit. It's also common to put a delay before it to function as a pre-delay. I am not going to do that, and similarly, I won't be doing that with the Spring reverb either, just to try to make it as much of a direct apples to apples comparison. So anyway, without further ado, let me get the Pro Tools going here, and we'll make it happen. So when I had my my old Master Room Spring, one of the places I really liked it a lot was on electric guitars, so I figured I'd start us there. Also happens to be a place that I really like plate reverb. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bit of playback on some guitars I recorded, and we'll be able to compare the two reverbs on those sources. So here's the guitar dry, just as recorded. And we'll get the plate reverb on there first. It puts a nice halo of sound around the track. Kind of fills out some of the spectrum. It also takes up a lot of space, as you can probably hear. If I put this all in context, it might even be a little more obvious. You can probably hear how it fills out the low end, but maybe to a bit of an extreme degree. It's kind of clouding things up a little bit. compare it to the spring. A little A/B for you. Plate. And spring. And let's check it out in context. Still on the spring. We'll go back and listen again in a second, but real quick, I just want to talk about what I'm hearing. The plate fills up a lot more space, particularly in the lower registers, and it's thick and it's lush and it's everything we love about plates. The spring, on the other hand, it's noticeably brighter. There's a little bit of like a crunchy upper mid sort of frequency thing going on, but it sits in the track almost kind of invisibly. Like you notice when it's missing, but you don't necessarily notice when it's there. I'm gonna roll back again and play this heavier section to demonstrate that. I'll toggle that in and out so it's really easy to hear. All right, so here's the spring. And the plate. Spring again. It out. I think what you probably noticed there is how the spring kind of fills out similar space that the plate does, but it doesn't take up as much room. It doesn't cloud up the mix as much. It sort of handles the low mid sort of heaviness, I guess, of the guitars, I think, a little bit better in this instance than the plate. While the plate gives you this big, giant, lush, kind of pillowy sound, it's probably a bit much for higher gain, like fuzzy guitars like I have here. Probably what I would do when I mix this song, which I'm actually doing tomorrow, is the plate would probably work really well on the lead guitar part to fill that out, and the spring would live very happily, I think, on the rhythms. For fun here, I'm gonna just solo out the return of the plate and the spring and try to draw attention to just what the reverb sounds like, so you're not hearing it against the source track at all, just hearing it by itself, just on the return side. So get that dialed up next. All right, so what I've done is I've got both the reverb sends here are gonna be pre-fader, and I'm just gonna toggle between the reverb returns so you can hear what's what. So start with the spring. And we'll jump over to the plate. Back over to the spring. You can hear it's a lot thinner, but sort of sits out of the way of where you'd imagine the guitars would be. So got that with the guitars. And the sounds just don't interfere with each other versus the plate here, which gets a little cloudy. Back to the spring. Hear that nice, beautiful tail. So smooth. Let's check out the tail on the plate the same way. the spring. Cool stuff. Okay, so to illustrate that point I was making earlier about favoring the spring reverb for the thicker rhythm guitar and maybe favoring the plate for the lead line, I figure I should probably provide a demonstration of exactly that. So start with the lead guitar here. It's dry, nothing on it. That wasn't recorded, so this is as recorded. And let's get the plate on there. Again, you get that nice little halo, sort of stereo halo happening. And then the spring. I'm missing that low mid now. And the higher kind of the higher frequency in the spring, the more sort of upper mid forward sound is a bit disruptive to my ear, to the sort of sizzly lead guitar tone. You know, you could probably EQ some bottom end in on the spring, which I will try, because if you don't have the space or if you can't afford a big ass plate, this would still be a great option. And let me see what that sounds like with this going here. All right, so what I just did was on the AudioScape 305, I boosted the 150 hertz band, the 600 hertz band, and I cut a little bit of the 6K band. And that was sort of my attempt at filling out the bottom part of the spectrum that I felt was missing from the spring as compared to the plate, and then kind of smoothing out the upper mids a little. So let's see how that sounds. As compared to the plate. Pretty nice. There's still a certain lushness to the plate that gives a more of a kind of a nice backdrop for that lead to sit on top of, but the spring with the EQ fills out in a really nice way and does give a really lovely and lush sense of space. So let me put the spring back on, and I'll flatten out the EQ as it's going. And I'll also raise the return up after I flatten the EQ, because it'll kind of level match a little bit better that way. So this is with the EQ on. And I'll flatten it out now. I think you can really hear how it's lost some of that sense of, I guess, warmth, we'll say, as much as I hate that term. And I'm going to put this back in pre-fader, and we'll do a little A-B on the plate and the spring, the EQ'd spring, just to be totally thorough. Okay, so we've got the EQ back on the spring, boost at 150, boost at 600, cut at 6K, and now we can toggle between the EQ'd spring and the plate reverb and see what we got. So here's the EQ'd spring. And we'll jump over to the plate. It's funny, now the plate feels a little bright. wonder if I can dial some sizzle into the spring. Nice. So what I did was I actually boosted a little bit of the 2K on the spring, and I flattened the 6K back out again. So it's going to be a bit brighter than it was a minute ago. And here it is. And we'll jump over to the plate. So still a bunch more mid-forward on the spring. Frankly, I still prefer the plate for the lead sound, but you can hear where it works as a reverb on the rhythm sound to have the more upper mid-forward sound that kind of stays out of the way of the chunk. Options are good. Let's jump over to vocals. All right, I got a couple vocal tracks to try this out on. I am basically keeping the EQ that I used on the spring because I just think it sounds really good. One thing about the AudioScape remake, whatever we're calling this new device, as compared to the original 305, is that this EQ is like infinitely better sounding to my ear. It's really powerful. I don't know technically what's different, if anything, but the EQ on my original unit was always kind of hit or miss, and whatever AudioScape have done on this new one, it just feels more sort of powerful. Like I'm able to coax cooler sounds out of this new EQ, and that's bearing fruit here. Again, boost at 150, boost at 600. The rest of it's set flat for now. We'll see if that changes when I start comparing against the plate. But I have been finding those boosts in the low end have more or less been my kind of like default settings as I've been getting to know this new reverb toy. Anyway, enough talk. Let me play you a vocal with some spring. Well, we'll start dry actually. Here's the dry vocal. I assure you now no one is listening. You can hear a little bit of room ambience. That's because it's recorded in a live room and compressed and distorted. So some of that's creeping into the raw track. That's by design. In fact, I think I might have even had a room mic set up now that I'm thinking about it. We recorded this a long time ago, so my apologies to anyone who actually cares. So here comes the spring. It's awesome. It's so good. Listen to that. Oh, stop your crying. No one is listening. Oh, you can throttle your limitations, find their end. Beautiful sense of space. A ship in a bottle, pulled right down by a tugging thread. And the plate now. It's been 30 days with a dirty body and an earthen bed. But when you sleep, yeah, you go down dead. But when you sleep, yeah, you go down dead. You know, again, the sense of space that the spring provides and this kind of the sense of lushness and sustain is so good. The plate does it as well, but it does it at the cost of a bit of muddying. Really, the plate just takes up so much space, whereas the spring just has this way of surrounding the source and giving it kind of some extra sparkle without swallowing it or swallowing the rest of the track, as I'll demonstrate here. So here we are dry. We'll put the plate on. A ship in a bottle, pulled right down by a tugging thread. It's been 30 days with a dirty body and an earthen bed. But when you sleep, yeah, spring. One thing that's kind of remarkable here is just how much more I can turn the spring up before it becomes even noticeable. Okay, back to the plate. Toggle go back and forth a bit now. Over the spring. Sleep like the dead, we lay down to dream. And then dry. Sleep like the dead, we lay down to dream. I assure you now no one is listening. All of them are scared. Spring. And alone. They travel over me and you. You really miss it when it's gone. I mean, it blends the vocal so nicely in with the track without overwhelming anything the way that sometimes the plate does. It's really just an awesome tool. All right, I just want to take a second here to give you just the return of each of the reverbs. And we will start with the spring. I'm just going to loop this phrase for ease of operation here. Over to the plate. Back to the spring. You know, another thing that stands out to me now that I'm listening to just the returns like that is the stereo image on the spring actually feels a lot more natural. The plate's a little lopsided. That's probably because our plate needs to be tuned a bit. We haven't had anyone work on it in a while, so sorry. But it is a consideration, which is that plates need to be serviced with some frequency. The spring, I don't know, maybe not so much. I suppose the experts over at AudioScape could tell you that. But I never worked on my vintage 305, and I had that for a number of years, and as far as I could tell, nobody ever worked on it in the couple of decades that it was alive before I got my hands on it either. So that's just one of those little sort of hidden maintenance things that you don't necessarily think about, but is worth consideration. I want to now take a minute here to try the different reverbs out on a background vocal, which is a way different timbre from this lead vocal. It's a different singer with a much higher register. I think it might be kind of interesting to take a listen to, so let's do it. So here I've got my other singer rocking and rolling. It's been 30 days obviously a high register. With a dirty body and a northern bed. And I'll toggle from spring, which is where we're at right now, over to the plate. With a dirty body and a northern bed. Plate. It's been 30 days with a dirty body and a northern bed. It's been 30 days with a dirty body and a northern bed. It's been 30 days with a dirty body and a northern bed. Yeah, you know, the spring just sounds a little more transparent to me. I don't quite feel as much like I've just added on reverb. That's one of those for better or worse situations. Maybe sometimes you want it to sound a little swimmier. In this case, I actually think the spring is really flattering to the singer Johnny's voice there. So I'm going to make note of that for tomorrow's mix session. I thought it might be fun to try the two reverbs out on some synth tracks that are part of this session. So let's start with the spring. Again, it blends so easily. I really love that. I'm gonna add a little top end to it just to do so. And let's compare to the plate. We'll bypass all the reverbs. Back with the plate. It's nice. It's really nice. Back to the spring. Bypassing both. I really love the way that both the reverbs fill the spectrum out really nicely, fill the space out really nicely, and it'd be hard to choose a favorite. Maybe a blend of the two, frankly, because there's some magic going on in the lower mids on the plate, but the spring is adding this really great sort of sparkle. Let's take another listen to that, actually. So here's the spring, the plate, and we'll blend to both here. Pass them both. So good. Alright, I'm actually loving that blend, and I want to hear it in the context of the track, so let's check that out. So we're hearing both reverbs now. Just on the synths, I've taken them off everything else, just in case you're wondering. Actually mute the vocals for this. Synths. I'm sorry, we're gonna mute the reverb on the synths. Back in. Listen to that. Kill the reverbs again. It's awesome. So good. All right. Let's get tricky. I'm gonna try the spring and the plate on some drum tracks. Springs traditionally don't perform well on drums unless you're going for that kind of boingy reggae thing or something in that vein. However, my original 305 did some pretty cool stuff on snare when the source was right. So I'm keen to try it out against the plate, which is virtually foolproof on drums and kind of just always sounds great. So let's do a little bit of listening. I'll give you the drums dry first for reference. You can hear there's a lot of room mic on these, so hopefully that doesn't obscure what's going on. Maybe I'll solo the snare actually to start. And we'll put the plate on. Let's try the spring. Go back to the plate. And back over to the spring. I should mention too that I flattened the EQ on the spring. It's set flat. What's compelling to me about this is that the the spring reverb sounds like a real space. I get more of a sense of a room, oddly, from that. The same is not true for the plate. The plate is providing some tail and some lushness there, but not really giving you a sense of a physical space. These again. There's our plate. It's adding like some warmth and some sustain and all that, but again, when I go to the spring, it almost kind of puts you in a room. So let's see how that sounds in the context of first the drum mix, and then I'll put in the other tracks here. So here's our spring. And I'll just toggle in and out a couple times while it's playing. It's really nice. And let's compare it to the plate. The plate muddies things up a little to my ear. It's kind of a slower build time on the echoes in the plate, which I think is part of what sounds a little unnatural to me in terms of the drum mix versus the spring, which sounds a little bit more like a room where your discrete echoes build up kind of quickly, and you get that more sense of like kind of a smaller space, less diffuse space, what have you. So here's the spring again. The plate, and I'm gonna put it in with the whole track now, maybe without the vocals. The vocals are a little dry. So back to the spring. Switch over to the plate. Muddy. And back to the spring. Really miss it when it's gone. It's like the snare just comes alive with the reverb on it. I'd like to see if I can get... the this spring reverb of ours to boing at all. My hope is that sending some bottom heavy kick drum to it will reveal its springy nature. And yet, here we are, and it just doesn't want to get boingy. Oh! There it is. So with some effort, which is to say, by jamming a lot of signal into it, a lot of bottom heavy signal into it, I am able to get just a smidge of boinginess out of it. Let's turn up the bottom end on the EQ to see if that adds any weirdness. Actually sounds really good. Doesn't seem to have any effect on the boinginess one way or the other. But it does sound kind of nice in the bottom end. And what I'm doing now is just dialing back the 2K and the 6K, which is roughly where the boinginess lives to my ear. I mean, It's not specifically those frequencies, but those are the only options I have on the faceplate of the AudioScape Reverb. So that's what I'm doing. And the boinginess is, of course, attenuated. I'm not necessarily advocating for putting spring reverb on kick drums, but it's kind of fun to experiment with. Doesn't sound that bad. Let's kill it. Compare that to the plate. No boinginess, but that bottom end's a little wily sounding. Back to the spring. Maybe cut some of the 600. It's not bad. So there it is on drums. Let's try it. This is the last experiment. Let's try it on the overheads. Flatten the EQ back out again. It's not doing a lot for me on the overheads. Let me hear the plate by comparison. So here's where the smoother response of the plate, I think, kind of bears serious fruit. The plate on the overheads is, I think, a much nicer fit versus the spring. It gets a little splatty sounding. At least for this track, splatty is not what I'm going to be ultimately going for. Back over to the plate. Might be able to EQ some of that out. Let's try. It's a pretty similar EQ setting that I used on the guitars. I'm boosting 150 and 600, and here I'm cutting a pretty significant amount of 2K and a little bit of 6K. It's an improvement. But it still, just to my ear, doesn't have the density and lushness of the plate that I think works pretty favorably on the cymbals, especially that hi-hat. The drummer, who is me in this case, is really wailing on that thing, so it could use all the help it could get. Let's check it out in the whole drum mix just for fun. So here's the spring in the full drum mix, and then without. Let's compare that to the plate. Back to the spring. It's interesting that spring in context actually really sounds quite good. It's not bugging me the way it was when I had it isolated. In fact, I maybe even prefer it. Funny. I think I do prefer it in context. Plate here is nice. There's a little bit more of a push in the low end that I like. But when it picks back up again, it's murky. So Depending on how ambitious I'm feeling when I'm mixing the track, maybe I will automate it so the plate comes in that little mellow kind of pre-chorus section. That would be fun and creative. That's what mixing is for. So there you have it. Hopefully that was as informative for you as it was for me. It's interesting to directly A/B the differences this way. In the past, when I had my old vintage 305 and the plates upstairs, I would just kind of put them on an aux send and turn up a knob, and whatever grabbed me in the moment was what made it to the final mix. But sitting down and really kind of examining in a somewhat more controlled way the difference between the two has been very instructive, and I come away with it feeling like if you don't have a pile of money and a bunch of free space for a big physical plate, these 305Rs from AudioScape make a pretty good substitute if you are on the market for a mechanical, physical reverb as opposed to a digital emulation or something similar. There's something to be said about a piece of material, a piece of metal vibrating and creating an ambient effect. It's a little bit more alive than what you're going to get out of most digital processors. If there's any questions, any comments, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I'll try to answer them. Maybe I'll even be able to make another video if there's particular sounds you'd like to hear running through this thing. Hope everyone's great. Stay safe out there. And big thanks to AudioScape for making awesome gear. Big thanks to Audicon, who makes the plate upstairs. That's Gene Lawson, I believe. Love his stuff too. So plug for both of those guys. And that's all I got. See you again soon sometime. Thanks for watching. Bye.